The Johnny Carson, the king of late night, and the women who rattled him for 30 years, nothing rattled Johnny Carson. Presidents, drunks, wild animals, weeping guests, he handled them all without breaking a sweat behind that desk. But a handful of women could do what world leaders couldn't: throw him off his rhythm, on live television, in front of millions. One of those nights became so legendary that people swear they watched it happen, even though it never did. This is the real story of 5 women, 5 very different kinds of chemistry, and the moments that made the king of late night look, for once, like just a man. Guest number 1, Sally Field. Of all the women on this list, only one actually dated him. And the story isn't the romance you'd expect. By 1979, Sally Field had shed the flying nun image and was writing toward an Oscar for Norma Rae. Her first appearance across from Carson on February 20th of that year seemed harmless enough, until Field revealed her ex, Burt Reynolds, had given her survival tips for handling Johnny. The last one, be aggressive. She pulled a can of shaving cream from her purse on live television and smeared it on his face. The audience lost it. What viewers didn't know was that this charming, funny woman would go on to date Carson himself over the next few years after his marriage to third wife Joanna Holland collapsed. But here's the twist nobody expected. Decades later, Field would describe the pairing not as a fairy tale, but as something closer to an uncomfortable game of pursuit, later famously summing up the dynamic as an octopus chasing a reluctant guppy. She admitted she never quite figured out how to say no to him, and eventually resorted to telling him she'd had a breakdown just to end it. The most powerful man on television, it turns out, wasn't the one in control of that relationship. And the woman who couldn't say no to him was about to become the one who got away, cleanly, and on her own terms. Guest number 2, Dolly Parton. If Field slipped past Carson's guard with sincerity, Dolly Parton did it with sheer, unstoppable charisma. She first sat across from him on January 19, 1977, her 31st birthday, arriving in an all-pink jumpsuit and opening with Higher and Higher, before settling into trade jokes with Johnny and Ed McMahon about growing up one of 12 children in the Tennessee mountains. It was the start of a friendship that would stretch across decades of appearances. By 1979, the two had settled into an easy, teasing rhythm. Carson, ever direct, needled her about her figure. "I know you've been trying to lose my weight," he told her at one point, referencing her famous curves. Parton, without missing a beat, joked back about weighing 100 and plenty and having recently lost the plenty. At one point, she stumbled into an unintentional double meaning about keeping him hot, caught herself mid-sentence, and dissolved into laughter along with the entire studio. Neither of them ever lost the thread of the bit. That was the magic of it. That same year, on September 19th, she topped even that. As the segment wound down, Parton reached behind her chair, pulled out an acoustic guitar, and told Carson she'd written him something, a song thanking him for how good his show had been for her career. It's one of the only times in Tonight Show history a guest serenaded the host with an original composition, written just for him. But charm wasn't the only weapon in this list. One woman's specialty was making Carson visibly forget what he was supposed to say next, and the cause wasn't a song. Guest number 3, Raquel Welch. Raquel Welch didn't need props or punchlines. Her mere presence did the work. She first appeared on Carson's couch in 1968, sweeping out in a long white gown, while Carson opened with a joke comparing her dress's whiteness to a detergent commercial. She shot back, without hesitation, that she'd never leave the country without saying goodbye to him, and grabbed his hand as the audience roared. It set the tone for a rapport that would continue across more than a dozen appearances over the next 2 decades. What made those interviews different from her appearances with other hosts was the tension between how Welch wanted to be seen and how the culture insisted on seeing her. She pushed back more than once on being reduced to sex symbol status, telling Carson she resented the assumption that came with the label, that being desired meant being seen as shallow or untalented. Carson, for his part, admitted with a grin that he'd had to learn to control his own reputation too, drawing one of the bigger laughs of the segment. She returned again and again through the 70s and 80s, promoting The Three Musketeers in 1974, plugging Raquel with Love in 1980, still trading barbs with Carson well into the Jay Leno era of guest hosting in 1988. Across 2 decades, she proved she could hold her own against the sharpest interviewer in television, no small feat. But not every legendary Carson moment involving a glamorous guest and a loaded question actually happened. One of them became so famous, so believable, that even Carson himself had to deny it. Guest number 4, Zsa Zsa Gabor. Here's the story everyone remembers. Zsa Zsa Gabor walks onto Carson's set with a white Persian cat in her lap, bats her eyes, and asks Johnny if he'd like to pet her pussy. Carson, cool as ever, replies that he'd love to, but first she'll have to move that damn cat. The studio erupts. It becomes, for generations of television fans, the single most quoted exchange in Tonight Show history. There's just one problem: it never happened. No tape of the moment exists. No contemporary newspaper or magazine mentioned it, despite the fact that the FCC was actively monitoring Carson's show for indecency during that exact era, and lesser remarks had drawn official complaints. When fact-checkers eventually tracked down both Gabor and Carson decades later and asked them directly, both denied the incident ever took place. Researchers now believe the joke started as a generic, pre-existing gag, the kind traded among comedians for years, that got attached to Gabor's name simply because she fit the part: glamorous, foreign, famous for her many marriages more than her acting. Versions of the same legend have been pinned on Raquel Welch, Farrah Fawcett, and Anne Margaret, too. What is real is that Gabor was a frequent, unpredictable guest capable of real on-air fireworks, including a notorious 1963 blow-up with Marlon Brando, who showed up visibly drunk and traded insults with her on camera until she stormed off the set entirely. That clash actually happened, cameras rolling, no myth required. Sometimes the truth is stranger and messier than the legend built to replace it. And the final name on this list proves that Carson's most memorable chemistry wasn't always about jokes at all. Guest number 5, Angie Dickinson. By the mid-1970s, Angie Dickinson was one of the biggest names on television, playing Sergeant Pepper Anderson on Policewoman, a role that made her the face of a new kind of leading woman: sharp, capable, and never played for a punchline. She brought that same command to Carson set across a string of appearances through 1979, 1980, and 1981. Unlike guests who came to promote a project and leave, Dickinson's appearances became known for a different rhythm. She wasn't there simply to answer Carson's questions. She matched his energy beat for beat, turning some segments into something closer to a genuine sparring match between two performers who each knew exactly how good the other one was. It made her one of Carson's most reliably compelling recurring guests for nearly a decade, proof that the sharpest chemistry on that couch didn't always come from flirtation or spectacle. Sometimes it just came from two people who refused to let the other one win the segment. 5 very different women. 5 very different kinds of hold over the most composed man in television. And only one of the stories turned out to be fiction, which, in the end, might be the most fitting punchline of all.